Okay, moving along. Now we're on exercise 16. This is a more involved reading files. And this is the stage where we start to ramp up what you do in programming. Up until this point, you've sort of just been just typing in code that printed things out, then a little bit of reading from the screen or from a user. So now we're getting into kind of really what programs do, which is open files and do things to them, or at least a lot of scripting and automation. So we're just going to type this in, just like we always do, and then I'm going to explain it. Okay, so what we have now is all the code entered in. And this is actually going to be a fairly interesting program, so I'm going to run it first. But first I want to go back through and confirm that I typed it in correctly. So using the usual process I teach you, which is to start from the bottom and go to the top. And as I do this, you can't see it, but my finger is tracking the code on the left. And I'm also sort of reading it backwards from the back of the line to the front of the line. Okay. Now let's try to run it. Double check what you wrote to make sure that you know how to run it. Oh, I might have actually got one thing wrong. Nope, there we go. So this is an interesting thing. I haven't taught you logic yet. Later on, the second half of the book, you learn to use a thing called an if statement where you don't need to do this. But what I've got here is a very simple, basically kind of like an if statement. If I hit Control-C now, it's going to do this thing where it explodes like that. But at least it didn't keep running. However, if I hit Enter, it'll keep going. Now what it's done is it's basically gone and truncated the file, made it 0 size, and now I can go to like, this is the line 1, apples. This is the line 2. I'm just typing gibberish in here. It doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so now it actually wrote 3 lines. So let's check it out. There we go. Those are the 3 lines we did. So now let's look at what I did in the code. So here's where the Control-C part versus Enter is. Here's how you open the file. But notice what I'm doing is I'm adding this extra parameter. Now remember, we talked about these functions are commands, and you're passing them parameters. So file name is a parameter, just like with raw input. And these work kind of like scripts that you've been writing, or like command line tools, right? And then a W, that's a string, so you know what that is a new parameter. And what this does, it tells open to open it for writing. So we're allowed to write to it. The default is to open them just so we can read them. Now, there's another operation, another function we can do to our file we just opened. We can read them. We can also do truncate. So we can tell the file, hey, make yourself smaller, like 0 size. Once that's done, then I get 3 lines from the user. You already know how to do that. And then I use this thing called write. And again, this is another thing I can do to the target. I can say .write, and that's sort of like telling the file, hey, write this line. And then I go, hey, write this new line. Hey, write that line. Hey, write this new line. Hey, write that line. And then finally, I'm telling the target to close. And this is sort of like just good hygiene. This script is so small, you wouldn't actually need to do that. It would just exit. But I'm sort of like making you do this now because it's good hygiene. It's just practice so that later on you do this all the time without thinking about it, so that way it's necessary. Now that's the gist of what this does. In the exercise, you should play with this a bunch. And remember, write the English comment above each line of code to break it down. If you go through this and your mind is vague about particular spots or things like that, just go back and write an English phrase above every single line and it'll make sense. And then if you don't really know what that line is, try like putting in some of the function names and things like that. I'll give you an example. So maybe you don't know what all the second options are to open. Well, if you were to go to your favorite search engine and punch in Python open function or Python open, you would pull up the documentation for this. So with that in mind, go and read the common student questions. In case you don't know what's going on, go and read online what all the different documentations you can about this, and then make sure you break down the file if you haven't understood it. And again, read the exercise; it gives a bit more explanation. All right, next up, exercise 17.